Hello and welcome to In Focus with me, Curtis Hinton, on Q's News. Today on In Focus, we are going to be talking about Keir Starmer's recent trip to Ukraine and Poland. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump 2.0 as he returns back to the White House this coming Monday and what it means for his relations with the Labour Party. And finally, we're going to be talking about Elon Musk and his continuing influence on UK politics after a minister this week refuted that he has any impact at all. Joining me and welcome back to the programme, we've got Lee Harris, a broadcaster and political commentator, and making his debut on the programme, we've got Jonathan Wong, who's also a political commentator. So welcome both to the programme. It's great to have you both on the show.
Thanks for having us.
Lee, you've been here before. You know what it's all about. Keir Starmer, your favourite person in the entire world. He's been on another trip this week. He's visited our friends in Ukraine and in Poland. He likes to spend some time out of the country. This new deal he's put in place, what's your thoughts on it, Lee?
Well, if we're talking about this 100-year deal with Ukraine, this kind of partnership as they're discussing it, I'm not quite sure what to make of it. I mean, it just seems like political theatre to me. I mean, my stance on Ukraine is of course, I'm very much against, like most normal people are, the illegal invasion from Russia. I think it's absolutely right to stand by Ukraine. But to me, I think things have changed here in the UK. We've supported Ukraine for quite some time, and rightly so.
Yeah.
But I think we've reached the stage now where I suppose two things are happening, right? So we've got domestic issues in the UK, which are making people wonder why we're spending so much money over there and agreeing these 100-year deals with Ukraine, which cost $3 billion a year, as I understand it. That's what that's what we are willing to give to Ukraine, which is fine. So we've got the domestic issue, which is changing people's opinion about how much support we can provide Ukraine. And we've got Trump about to enter the White House. Now, I not want to skip on. I know we're going to discuss Trump later, but it is relevant to mention it now. And what's happening at the moment over in Ukraine is Russia are desperately trying to gain as much territory as possible before the inevitable peace talks start. And Ukraine are obviously trying to do exactly the same thing. So there is some logic behind that. Don't get me wrong, to try and get Ukraine to be in the best possible position for when those peace talks start. So look, I haven't got a huge amount of problem with that. What I am finding, and I think I'm aligned with a lot of the British public on this now, I'm becoming a bit wary of this constant financial support that we're providing Ukraine. And of course, because if we can't afford in this country to spend 1.4 billion on keeping our pensioners warm in the winter, I'm not sure we should be spending 3 billion a year for the next 100 years on Ukraine. I'm also not sure it's the right thing to do, considering that Keir Starmer is we have 5-year terms of politics in this country. Is it right for him to sign the UK up to 100 years when he's only going to be the Prime Minister for 5 minutes, hopefully less than 5 minutes if we can get rid of him. So yeah, my thoughts on the whole 100-year thing was political theatre. I'm not sure it's going to go down particularly well with the UK public.
Jonathan, I want to bring you in on this conversation. Firstly, welcome to In Focus. It's great to have you on, and hopefully the first of many times. What's your stance on this? So he's taken a lot away from British people. He's taxing heavily. He is taking away the fuel payments, as Lee said, and he's given a lot to foreign countries in foreign aid and in these partnerships. What's your thoughts?
Well, I agree. Basically, Lee's spoken most of the things I wanted to talk about anyway, because I agree with him completely. But in addition to that, I think the British public has lost appetite in foreign aid generally as a concept, because we see so many domestic problems that we've been taxed so heavily, as you said. We've not only just about Ukraine, 3 billion, obviously a lot of money. You also got a problem with the farmers. We've got a problem with the pensioners, and we got a problem. So we are taking money from our farmers, and then we're giving it away to Nigeria. We also have the grooming gang issue, but we are also giving foreign aid to Pakistan. So I think the general public just don't have any appetite for foreign aid. So in a sense, like, I actually have a quite radical stance. I actually think like the majority of foreign aid is just basically legalized international money laundering. I don't see any reason for any of it. Like, why are we giving money to Pakistan? Why we give, like, I mean, I understand the war is important, but I think we've already missed a boat. Like, it's kind of like, if you are, say we are two countries that we're like brothers, right? If somebody attack you, I will jump in there and fight. I'm not going to go, oh, here's some money, buy some weapons. That is not the way. You either go to war or you don't. There's no half measure in this. Just by doing this, this is like a war of attrition on your own people. And we're a tiny country compared to Russia, compared to our competitors like China. This is not a game that we can win. So it's like a pointless pursuit. You either go all in or you don't at all. So that's pretty much what my stance is on that.
Well, I mean, in regards to that, I mean, Putin last October turned around and said that he would see any sort of involvement from the West as a direct attack on Russia. The UK have committed to sending 1,540 artillery barrels, ramping up troop training and providing mobile defence systems to bolster their defence capabilities. Now, we know for a fact that Ukraine have been attacking on Russian soil. That has been something that has come out, and it's used foreign weapons to do so. So from the British stance, as citizens, would you both support if it's in defence and refute if it's in attack?
I'll let speak first. Yeah, you can speak first. Yeah.
Lee?
I think, principally, I think a lot. It's difficult to say because one thing we do know is what's happened as a direct result of this visit from Keir Starmer is it's angered Putin. Yeah. He's not particularly happy with British troops being in, for example, Poland as well. I think we've got the defence pact with Poland as well. So, look, I don't think we should tiptoe around Putin too much. I think that you need to stand up to bullies. But I'm not 100% sure that this is particularly the right move right before peace negotiations start. I mean, there might be some strategy behind it, this is our last push right up until the last minute. And all of this is just political posturing purely for Putin's benefit. So Starmer is saying, well, yeah, we're going to sign a 100-year partnership with Ukraine. Look, Mr. Putin, we're now signing a defense pact with Poland. We do not care about what your influence is and what your threats are. There is some part of me that does admire that stance. The proof is in the pudding that we are yet to eat to see how this plays out.
And I mean, in regards to Starmer reiterating the UK support for Ukraine's NATO membership, do you agree they should be able to join NATO? They should be free to do so?
I'm on the fence about that one. My heart says yes, my head says no. At the end of the day, that's one of the things that Putin used as an excuse to start this invasion in the first place. He did a big speech to his people. I think it was literally 24 hours before they invaded. And his biggest beef was having NATO weapons, in his words, or his eyes, I should say, pointing directly at Russia.
Yeah.
Should we prod Putin like this? I'm not sure. I really, my stance has changed. This Ukraine war has changed my own political stance. If you'd have asked me prior to the invasion, I would have said absolutely yes. NATO is a defensive force. And I can't see why there'd be any problem at all. But you've got to see it from both sides, I think. As time goes on, you've got to use your grown-up hat, put it on, and think that is Ukraine joining NATO going to benefit anybody? And I'm not sure at this stage that it will.
I think, Jonathan, we've seen Zelensky as a salesman, really, over the last 4 years, over the last 3 and a bit years. In the amount of money he's managed to secure for Ukraine, it's incredible. I don't think there's anything been quite like it in terms of support for a country in the situation that they're in. In 2014, they lost Crimea, and then it died down, and nothing else came up. So when it came to NATO and Ukraine's real opportunity to join, that's what they got their backup about. So do you think this is about NATO, or do you think this is about Putin wanting to get back, essentially, what was the Soviet Union?
Well, I mean, Putin obviously wants to get back what is part of the Soviet Union, but I think by negotiating, getting Ukraine to join, we're giving him legitimacy to actually pursue the war. So I think he has the opposite effect, because if you want to have it as a defensive alliance, but you're actually handing him on a plate the excuse to start the war in his perspective. So whether you agree with it or not, and I don't think we should be prodding, poking the Russian bear, especially given that we've just cut our defense budget by £500 million. So it just doesn't really make much sense, because we are essentially sending our weapons over there. So there are reports that it's actually our troops that are actually doing the actual firing of the artilleries, because obviously it takes training. Yep. So if we send them the weapons, their troops are not immediately able to use it. So the reports that I've been reading, I don't know how legitimate they are, is that it's actually our troops that are essentially firing the weapons. So in Putin's eyes, we're actually attacking them already. So, if they attack us, I just don't think we should be sending our soldiers to die. And from all the factions and all the people in the military that I know, they don't have appetite to die for Ukraine either. So this is obviously if Russia is to invade the UK, all the British army would be like, right, that's it, we got a war to fight. But at the moment, I don't think morale has ever been so low, and the recruitments that I've seen has ever been so low. Especially plus with the DEI policies that we have in the British Army as well, which made it even worse. So army recruitment's at all-time low. Our defense budget's all-time low. I don't think we should be posturing for war in our position, given our position.
And do you think people, go back to 1939, when people would volunteer and then get drafted for a war, people were proud to fight for their country. People used to want to fight for their country. But now, who would want to fight for this country right now? We've got people who will manage to get out of it through their own means and ways, in maybe a switch of gender or something like that. Maybe they'll be switching back if they want to avoid being drafted. What's it going to look like if the UK attacked Russia, or if the UK assisted Ukraine in attacking Russia and Russia saw that as a direct attack? Can you see a national draft coming up? Can you see national service?
You bring up a really good point, because back in the days, I remember reading reports of people actually lying on their age. They're young, they're not old enough to enlist, and they're young people who are enlisted to fight the war. Now nobody wants to. You think the Zoomers want to fight this war? Definitely not. So I just don't think. We saw what happened in Ukraine. They're dragging men out of nightclubs to join the army, literally dragging them out. So I don't think Keir Starmer's going to do it.
Do you not think he's not? With Boris Johnson, you felt like he wanted to be given that wartime leader feel, and he had COVID to go through, and was synonymous with Winston Churchill and the painting pictures that came out. You felt like Boris Johnson treated it more as a presidency, and he wanted to be that.
Well, it's always easy to send men to die when you're sitting in an armchair posturing. You're not the one leading the army. So I think there's a lot of political theatre play at play there. So I don't think either of them believe in it really.
Lee, we're talking about people dying. Sir Keir Starmer maybe was at risk during his visit to Ukraine. There was a drone spotted over and shot down over where he was visiting Zelensky. Do you think that it was an attacking drone? Or nothing happened. Apparently, when it got shot down, there was no explosion or anything like that. Do you think it was just surveillance from Russia?
Probably. I didn't know that happened, I have to admit, but I would imagine so. I think a lot of this is... I don't think that Putin wants a war. I know he's effectively invading Ukraine, but he knows full well that if he was to fire a missile towards us or any other NATO country, within seconds we turn Russia to dust. Yeah. So there isn't. I don't think there's much of an appetite from Putin. What Putin wants his territory back. Just like you said at the beginning, he's still stuck in the 90s. He thinks Ukraine is his, and and there is, again, if you put your big boy hat on, there is some logic to what he's saying. He wants the Soviet Union back to how it was before, exactly what you said. I don't think he's stupid, so I don't think he would escalate to a wider war, because he would end up losing it. Of course, he could do quite a bit of damage in the meantime, and no one wants that. And yes, I would fight for my country with a drop of a hat. I know a lot of people that would, although it is very worrying looking at polling to show that a lot of young people wouldn't fight for their country. You compare that to Finland, where Finland has an 87% of Finns would fight for their country happily. I know they've got a slightly different geographical location than we do, and a slightly different approach to their country. They love their country over there, unlike over here where we teach our kids to hate their country. But that's a slightly different point. No, I do not think this is going to escalate into anything more than we are currently seeing. This is purely just Putin flexing his muscles, trying to get territory back. He's, and let's not forget, this has not gone well for Putin. This has been a very, very difficult war for Putin. They've gone through huge numbers of troops. They've got North Korea fighting for them at the moment and losing numbers there too. They've lost huge numbers of huge amount of military equipment. This has cost Russia an absolute fortune. So I don't think this is going to last much longer. I think when Trump comes in, he's going to fix it. Not just him, but I think the principle of Trump getting in is going to be the end game for the Ukraine war. So I hopefully 2025 will be the end of the Ukraine-Russia war. That's what I think everyone should hope for, and I think that's what will happen.
It wasn't just Ukraine he visited this week. He visited Poland too. He visited Auschwitz on the 80th anniversary of its liberation. So he visited there, and I believe he laid wreaths. He visited with his wife. But one big thing about him visiting Poland was his meeting with the Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Now, there was apparent conversations about the EU and the UK and EU having some sort of deals, whether it be free trade or something like that, customs release. I mean, are we looking at him turning his back on the US? We will get onto the US shortly and what it means with Labour, with Trump's new administration. But are we potentially looking at a Labour Party who will be more aligned to trying to get a EU-style deal with the European Union than to save themselves from the US? What do we think, Jonathan?
Potentially. I mean, he's having beef with Elon Musk, which is like the richest person in the US. So he clearly doesn't want US investment from the richest person there. So there is certainly some truth to that. I mean, there were also reports of they wanted to bring back up the question about free movement with the EU as well, which is potentially another problem for us, which is another betrayal of Brexit. But to a lot of people, Brexit hasn't actually been fully implemented because we're still running a lot of the legislation left over from the EU that we have never repealed. So, yeah, no, I think there's definitely a danger of that. So it does seem like he is leaning more towards the EU than the US, given all the previous statements that he's spoken about Donald Trump, as well as the Labour Party sent, was it 100 volunteers to campaign for Kamala Harris? For the Democrats. So yeah, so there's definitely some animosity between the US and the UK at the moment.
Ali, what do you think? Do you think there's an opportunity for Labour to essentially take us into the EU without officially taking us back?
Well, Keir Starmer has said many times, including in the last 24 hours, that he will not be joining the customs union or the single market, as he says. But what we all know is that he's speaking out of one side of his mouth and he's telling the European Union something different out of the other side of his mouth. He wants to be as closely aligned to the European Union as possible. I think he shares the kind of stupid Ed Davey approach. I don't know if you saw his ridiculous, childish post on X over the last couple of days, where he basically said that Donald Trump is a danger to the world and we need to know that we can't. It's the same old arguments we had when he got voted in 2016, that we need to align ourselves close to the European Union because look at the nasty Americans and their far right leader and all of this nonsense. That's just Keir Starmer's. That's his political alignment. So of course, if he had a choice, he would choose the European Union over the US any day of the week. But like he talks out of both sides of his mouth, he's also said that as soon as Trump is in office, he wants to ratify or get this trade deal done as soon as possible. So he says the right things. He just does the exact opposite. I mean, we can just finish quickly on the Chagos Islands, or Chagos Islands, however you choose to pronounce it. You look at how Keir Starmer was trying to rush that deal through before Trump got in. And they've just at the final hurdle. I think someone from the Trump administration must have put a phone call into Keir Starmer's team and said, "You cannot do this, not until Trump is in office." I mean, it is disrespectful. It doesn't matter who the American president is, to try and rush through a deal that will affect their military base. But I think that is another embarrassment for Keir Starmer that's just around the corner, is that Trump is going to take the credit for putting the kibosh on that deal, and rightly so. So yes, in answer to your question, Keir Starmer would love to have closer relations with the EU, and he doesn't care about US politics. Well, he doesn't want that relationship with the US while Donald Trump is in power. And we all know what he thinks of Donald Trump, what him, Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, David Lammy, all of the childish things that they've said about that President Trump. I can see that is exactly what he wants to do.
Well, I mean, Lee, that leads us on perfectly to the next part of the programme, which we're going to talk about Donald Trump 2.0 and what it means for the UK, the Labour Party. You referenced there that a lot of big names in the Labour Party, including the new ambassador, Lord Mandelson. I think we may have spoken prior about Lord Mandelson on the programme. And a very confusing one.
The very close friend of Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein enjoyer, Epstein Island enjoyer.
We'll keep off the Epstein topic just for now, but Donald Trump had a dinner with Sir Keir Starmer and Dave Lammy before he was officially elected as president back in September. They had a 2-hour dinner together. Labour have offered or said that they're open to a second state visit for Donald Trump. But last night was a UK-US relations party ahead of the inauguration on Monday. And there wasn't a single Labour member, not member, but a Labour minister.
They snubbed him, didn't they?
I mean, Jonathan, what do you think this sets a precedent for the next 4 years if Labour last 4 years?
Well, I mean, like I was saying earlier, they've literally sent 100 people to try and campaign for the other side. So, it's hardly surprising they don't invite you to the party, So, I think it's going to be difficult for... Yeah, it's going to be a difficult road for the next 4 years for the Starmer administration. I want to add from earlier as well of what Lee was saying about Starmer wanted to be with the EU. In fact, do you remember he was asked under an interview that he said he wanted to be, does he prefer Davos or Westminster? He preferred Davos. So that just showed that where his allegiance is obviously outwards rather than inwards. So... In Chinese, we have a phrase called fingers bending outwards, not inwards. It's mean people's loyalty on the out group than the in group. So that is what he is like. But back to the question of Trump. Yeah, you were going to ask me something, a question. What were you going to say?
Yes. So, I mean, what do you think that it's going to, essentially the next 4 years is going to look like? What do you think that it's going to mean for the UK? I mean, US is a strong ally. We're meant to be a strong independent nation now that we're away from the EU, and that's kind of what it was. And there was a lot of opportunity for that, which probably hasn't been utilised. I mean, it's not off to a great start, is it? Let's face it.
No, because I mean, like, US and the UK traditionally have the special relationship, and now is very, very shaky considering how anti-Trump administration the Labour Party has been since the Labour Party existed and since Trump was a thing. So I don't know how he's going to rectify that, because I remember the last meeting Starmer had with Trump in the US. Starmer was trying to convince Trump to give more money to Ukraine, and Trump was just talking about something else and pretty much snubbed him. So he's like, nope. So I don't really know how he's going to rectify that. But we will see. We will see.
Lee, what do we think about the... we spoke about the Chagos Islands. It supposedly, under Trump's request, was paused. Now, this is something he's probably going to come in on day one and look to try and get some sort of plans together for. Because like you say, the US have got an invested interest in the Chagos Islands, like the UK does, if you would believe it, under what Starmer was trying to do. What do you think he's going to do in regards to that? I mean, supposedly they want to give it back to the Mauritius people to vote on it. That's what they want.
Yeah, I mean, all of this is it's just ludicrous. We don't need to do any of it. I've read that the Trump team are vehemently against this deal. They will block it. There is absolutely no way that they will sign this off under any variation of the deal. I can't see any variation of the deal that the Americans would be happy with, especially under the principle that this all came about by a vote by the international... I can't remember what the international court's called, but it's associated with the UN, and it's a non-binding vote. All this vote said was that the UK should cede territory back to the Mauritians, etc. But it's not binding. We don't need to do anything. It's our territory. We can just leave it as it is. So on that basis alone, I think the US will stop the deal on that basis. The other thing to think about actually on this is a slightly wider point. An interesting thing that I was thinking about the other day is, will Trump use the things that he dislikes about the UK, and we know what they are at the moment with what Keir Starmer is doing to freedom of speech, locking up people for Facebook posts, etc., etc. Will he use that to try and influence the Labour government through trade negotiations, or possibly this Chagos Island deal? So I'm hoping that Donald Trump and Elon Musk can be a positive influence on this Labour government to say, look, if you're going to carry on, just putting people in prison for hurty words on social media, we're not going to give you a decent trade deal. That's what we would do. When we go over to China, for example, like that ludicrous, completely waste of time visit from Rachel Reeves over the last few days, for a measly 120 million a year, over 5 years. I mean, it's just ridiculous. When we go to China, we will mention human rights issues to them and use that as some sort of, way to influence China. I hope Donald Trump does the same thing with our authoritarian, crazy government here in the UK. We know full well that Elon Musk has a very, in fact, both of them do. We know Donald Trump is very close to you. He absolutely loves this country. Yeah. We've seen that clip of him on the plane being very proud of spending time with the royal family. His mum was British, as we know. And Elon Musk is a very special interest in British politics. He feels a link to this country.
Well, his grandmother, with Elon Musk, his grandmother was British. She was. So I mean, he has got a right. We discussed last week on the program whether or not Elon Musk potentially could, because people are saying he's not British, he's not English. Don't get involved. He probably could apply for citizenship, a third
That'd be awesome,
citizenship.
wouldn't he? Run for office even. But yeah, I mean, I just hope that that's what happens, because at the end of the day, we can't get rid of this government. Not yet, we can't anyway, unless it goes cap in hand to the IMF and there's some sort of general election, which I think is highly unlikely that they will call a general election. We've got 5 years of this Labour government, so I'm delighted. I'm utterly delighted that Trump is taking office. Wokeness is about to die. The left have taken a beating thanks to Donald Trump, and it's about to get very interesting.
We've seen worry that, haven't we, Jonathan? You mentioned earlier about DEI programs, Amazon, Meta. They've all got rid of them kind of since this new Trump. Are we seeing the left wokeness, not the left agenda, but the left wokeness disappear, or essentially just not exist anymore because no one is putting up with it anymore?
Well, I think we are reaching an inflection point. I mean, you can see in the UK we're lagging behind, but all over the West, so to speak. Like in the US, we got Trump being elected. In Europe, we got AFDs rising. So I think there's a massive trend of people simply just rejecting DEI, and even companies are rejecting DEI because it's not profitable. It's all a waste of money. So, but our government at the moment, the Starmer administration, is very, very good at doubling down, as we have seen. Like we had the 3 million signature petition to call a general election, which got rejected. They are rejecting the grooming gang national inquiry requests from Reform MPs. Actually, by the way, on that note, I've actually written a parliamentary petition to call for a national inquiry on the night that their one that got rejected in Parliament, and that's been sitting there under the committee for 10 days now, and they still haven't approved it. So I don't know what's happened with that. Usually they get approved in 5 days.
Just want to jump in there, Jonathan.
Yes.
What's your thoughts then on that point in regards to the area-specific inquiries, so the local inquiries that the government have set out?
Okay, so the problem is this: in a national inquiry, it's called statutory. So, which means they have the power to compel witnesses to give statements, to give evidence under oath. So, local inquiries generally don't have that power, which means, well, people they just don't have to give evidence if they don't want to. So, they could be statutory, but they're generally non-statutory. So that is one of the major problem of that. So this is why they're trying to brush it behind, which means, well, nothing's going to happen because they just, if you get a wall of silence and nobody has to be compelled to speak. So that is one of the main reasons that I think they're rejecting it.
Do you think that these local inquiries, though, could be a stepping stone? I know it's not what's being called for right now. A national inquiry is what's needed, and there's no reason at all to decline it or deny it, in my opinion. I think in anyone with common sense's opinion. But do you think that if certain things start being repeated, which we are expecting them to be in each area, that there is absolutely no way for them to deny a national inquiry?
Well, hopefully they will approve the petition, and then it will bounce back over another debate. It's just make it inevitable. But one of the potential problem with the localized inquiry is that you're essentially asking people to investigate themselves, and they don't even have to be compelled to give evidence. So it's like, oh hi, yes, I've investigated myself, and I found that I have done nothing wrong. And then
That's
he's just
a
not going to
tactic
go
used
anywhere.
by the Metropolitan Police quite a lot, to be honest. They
Yeah.
like to investigate themselves quite a lot without an external review.
Yeah, and he also got the Jess Phillips rejecting Oldham's request for a national inquiry without actually meeting any of the victims. She claims it's better for the victims, but on one of the interviews, she said it was revealed that it was actually Oldham's victims that actually called for a national inquiry because a localized one doesn't have enough power to actually thoroughly investigate because it doesn't have the statutory power to compel witnesses. So they
That
actually
wasn't the
demanded
only
it.
reason as well. There was another reason. You're absolutely right. The other reason was because of the point you made earlier, was because they said they couldn't investigate this properly because it would their own staff would be implicated in the investigation. So the reason I am totally against, not wanting to take over from Jonathan at all right now, the reason I'm
fine.
totally against these local inquiries is for that reason, is because you will have people who are up to their necks in it, having influence on that investigation. And to be fair to Oldham, that's why they phoned Jess Phillips. That's partly why, not the entire reason. You're also right to say that they didn't have the statutory powers to do it. But that was why they phoned Jess Phillips and wanted a national inquiry, and she rejected it. And it just makes you really think, why would you do that? Why would Jess Phillips, safeguarding minister, reject it? And the only conclusion that I can come to, this is my personal opinion, but she knows full well that this will be a PR disaster for the Labour Party. Yeah. They are up to their necks in it. It's predominantly Labour councils that are involved with these Pakistani rape gangs. And the other thing is Keir Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions for a big part of that period, and it just those two things together would be an absolute disaster for this government, on a disaster on top of already multiple disasters. So that's why they're resisting it. And I think this pathetic sort of local level inquiry that was announced by Yvette Cooper is an absolute disgrace. It's a whitewash. It honestly made me livid, absolutely livid.
What I found quite interesting is that on the PMQs, not last week, the week before, when they were debating this, and last week when Kimi Badenoch was debating this back and forth, I mean, the Conservatives did have 14 years to do something, or the period of time following, and they should have done a lot more about it. And it wasn't Kimi Badenoch, it's the Prime Minister, but she was in the safeguarding position. So she is as much to blame as the Labour Party. The Labour Party now can do something different. So Keir Starmer isn't that well liked upon a Labour MP. So he's got an opportunity here to actually get Labour MPs to like him. But not just that, to get the nation to like him too. If he broke away from those people that he's protecting because they've done something fundamentally wrong, look at what happened with Justin Welby of the Church of England. He knew what was going on. His head rolled. And he, in his own opinion, there should have been more. He hasn't come out and said more. In my opinion, he's still just as bad for not saying more about it now than he was when he covered it up. So Keir Starmer, he knows people are implicated. He might not know who. I failed to believe that. He probably does know who. But he now, by covering it up more, is making it substantially worse. And he's probably on course to become one of our worst prime ministers of all time by covering up such a big scandal. I mean, this is nothing when he wanted an inquiry as to whether or not Boris Johnson ate birthday cake at a party during COVID. Yes, obviously people were dying and it was a horrendous time for everyone. But we are talking about a national rape gang. And
so you hit the nail on the head there as well, right at the beginning, when you said about him. He could do something right now that would be very popular. We've seen polling. The recent polling that's come out has shown that more than 75% of the population think we need a full national inquiry. Now, why would he not do it? And he is dying for popularity at the moment. His personal polling is appalling. Yep. The only reason I can think of that Keir Starmer is resisting this inquiry is because he knows that this will expose his failings as Director of Public Prosecution. There is no other reason for it. I cannot think of a logical reason why he wouldn't take this low-hanging fruit and do this full national inquiry. There's one other reason, possibly, but I just can't contemplate that he would even think this, that it would be like a win for Elon Musk. Maybe that's the other reason he's rejecting it, or the Labour Party are doing this, because they think somehow this will make Elon Musk's rants on social media, which I fully agree with, by the way, will justify them in some way. I can't contemplate that. I think he would rise above that. I think even Keir Starmer would rise above that.
You'd like to think
get
so.
The popularity. So he is doing this for no other reason that it's going to expose his failings as Director of Prosecutions. public prosecutions. No other reason.
It's one more reason I can think of, though, because the thing is, the Labour Party has historically been importing a voting bloc. So the Pakistani Muslim is their client class.
You're right.
That's one more reason for that. Is, for example, the last election, we've finally seen the point of a critical mass, because the Muslim voting bloc always vote Muslim, but before they reached a voting bloc, a critical mass, they vote Labour Party. But we have seen a lot of independent Muslim MPs and councillors overtaking historically Labour Party constituencies. For example, Jess Phillips, one of the in his book, when her most recent election, I think it was dropped from about 5,000 majority to like about 500. So if there's another election in 4 or 5 years' time, she's going to lose her seat to an independent Muslim independent. That's what's going to happen. So this is like the process of. You can see the votes diminishing in all the Labour Party, in all the constituencies that historically they had a Muslim voting bloc. So they're kind of pandering to a class, to their own demise, in a sense. They finally reached the critical mass. So that's one more reason that I just want to add that could potentially bring in why they don't want to alienate their own voting bloc.
I think you're almost right with that, but at the same time, I also think last week on the program here at Q's News, we did a specific program on the grooming, on the rape gangs, on the Pakistani rape gangs, and we had a Pakistani doctor on the program. We had people who were very kind of high up within that society, and they made it very clear that they condemn these actions because they are humans. These men who did this aren't human beings. So the issue is Labour aren't clearing the name, in my opinion. They're not backing up the people who vote for them. So by doing so, they are damaging them more. And like you said, Jonathan, I think they're moving away from it and they're going independent because they just can't stand behind a party who isn't going to protect them, because ultimately they're protecting these paedophiles, their own people, these rapists as well, in my opinion, because they're only getting short sentences. And in doing so, they're alienating a whole entire... Look, we saw it in the US elections. We saw a huge shift in percentage from Democrat to Donald Trump in Muslim voters. And that's because he was up there. He had Muslims up on stage with him. He was showing them respect. He wasn't necessarily using them as scapegoats. He wasn't letting them rot. He was genuinely kind of speaking up in certain ways when they weren't to blame. Whereas Sakir Starmer isn't doing that, in my opinion. With this, he is allowing the narrative, obviously, of the Pakistani rape gangs. But by doing a national inquiry, we are specifically telling the world it was these people.
I think there is also a problem with that. We are underestimate the scale of the problem of how widespread or how well known it is in the communities. For example, in Rochdale and Rotherham, I believe we did the calculations before based on the population and the census data, 2011, of what percentage of the actual population of the Pakistani Muslim would be suspects in a town. So it works out to something like every 1 in 8 adult male is a suspect of a grooming gang in the population in the entire city. If 1 in 8 adult male is a suspect, I think a lot more people know about it in the community than you think. So that is a potential problem, because first you got the population and you divide it by half, a male and female, and then you do the adults age between 17 and I think the typical one from Rotherham, according to one of the Birmingham Live did a study that's based on police information. The typical Muslim Pakistani rape gang member is between 17 and 40. So if you use that age demographic, then you get a much smaller sample size, and you go, okay, well, 1 in 8, that's ridiculous in those towns that are happening. And those studies we did was based on older data. For example, Quilliam did the data I think it was 27 towns were known to have grooming gangs. We now have expanded. I think GB News, the latest one, is about 50. So if we literally double the data, 50 towns in the UK that we know of. And there is another one that is about to happen in Bradford, which has the highest Pakistani Muslim population in the entire country. So I think a lot more is going to be revealing. So it's quite difficult because obviously there are people who don't know anything about this, but the problem is there are people who might know about this who don't say anything about it. I mean,
who didn't speak up.
For example, what kind of community do you know that if somebody has a girl that they're raping, they can call up their uncle, go, hey mate, do you want to come over and rape her too? Oh yeah, sure. Everybody knows. You're reaching a level that is kind of an entire community is involved in the thing. They're all related. They're all friends.
something similar though? Because like we said, with the children's sex abuse scandal that happened throughout the Church of England, are we looking at small, tight-knit communities who are potentially not exposing each other, but it's almost like you can't go forward and say it because you are going to expose so many people. And I'm not saying that, in my opinion, you can't, because whatever it is, whoever it is, whether it's your mum, your dad, your brother or sister, you should be telling the police if they've done something like that, without a doubt.
Well, the problem is, like, I've actually been to like some of the trials, and there are actual family members or those who from the group, like their daughters will be there on trial crying, "Oh, Dad, we love you." I was like, okay, this is insane. Your dad just been convicted of raping, like, I don't know, 20 English girls, and you there saying you miss him, can't wait till you see back, they've done nothing wrong. So it's kind of like I can't see, I mean, there are people to condemn them, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to brush everyone. No, I'm saying that a lot of the community actually genuinely condone this, which is something that we don't want to think about, but the reality is a lot more widespread in the community wise than we think. I mean, I've known some Pakistani Muslims who are actually really genuine people who absolutely hate this as well. But I'm saying we are underestimating the scale based on the sheer numbers. That it's like an open secret level, because if you think about, like, I think the latest figures, like, estimates of 350,000 girls that's been raped over the, I don't know how many years. The earliest recorded, I think, from Advertiser is an article in 1975. It's gone around for 50 years. So people know if things have gone on for 50 years, this is even bigger than Epstein Island by 1,000-fold. Some people will know.
I think, like you said, it's so easy with such a small population of Pakistanis in the UK, and obviously with such a 1 in 8 you said there. It's tough for them not to be painted with the same brush. We shouldn't know. That's something we all, in my opinion.
No, I'm not saying we should. I'm not saying we should.
And I know you are. I know you're saying that. Yeah, I know you're saying that we shouldn't paint them all with the same brush, and it's tough. But you can understand why that some of them are feeling fearful. I imagine. I mean, both. I mean, if anything kind of happened, I mean, we looked at different people. When something happens, we tend to look at a race or a religion or something like that in a different way for however long a period it takes for a nation to go through it. One thing I do want to revert back to is the Donald Trump topic. Lee, we spoke last time about Lord Mandelson, last time you were on the show. He's found himself backpedaling, saying that he wants to have a good relationship and balancing ties between Russia and the UK is of top priority. This is just Labour getting its cat back in the bag, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, they have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Pop their tail between their legs and go back to America and basically say, oh, yeah, we do want to be friends, really. I'm not saying I don't want to criticise Mandelson for doing that. He has to do that. What I would criticise Labour for is the fact that they struggle to find absolutely anybody that hasn't criticised Donald Trump. Yeah. So they would be in this position no matter what. They're just not a fit and proper party to be in government. They obviously never thought they would be in government. They would have never said these things. That, they would have maintained their diplomacy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with criticising someone who you disagree with, but they took it to the next level. They were calling him a Nazi. And you've got to admit that I think that should exclude you straight away from having any diplomatic role if you're going to basically just be a student politician. Now, Mandelson does separate himself a little bit from the stupidity that we see from Lammy and Jess, not so much Jess Phillips, although she has done it, but Angela Rayner, Wes Streeting, the gobby ones from the Labour front bench. I think Mandelson does have an element of being a bit more of a grown-up. And I have heard some people on my side of the debate say that Mandelson is not a bad pick in terms that he's got the experience and he can be diplomatic when he needs to be. So, in the spirit of wanting US-UK relations to be as good as possible, as good as they possibly can be, I hope Mandelson is successful. I really do. But the problem is, Trump won't forget. Trump is a man who bases a lot of his relationships on loyalty, and I quite like that about Trump. If you are loyal to Trump, he is loyal to you. And he never forgets the people who slag him off. But I do know that the UK has still a very special place in Donald Trump's heart. Same with Elon Musk. And I have no doubt that Trump will be, what's the word? Of course, this is just a guess, but my guess is he will be diplomatic with the UK and he won't punish us in any way, but I do think he will lean on publicly as well. And this is what I really hope. I hope that Donald Trump stands in front of a camera with Elon Musk and says that how displeased he is about the way that Keir Starmer is running the UK. There's no harm in him doing that. I know there's got to be a little bit of diplomatic element to that, but I just really hope that Donald Trump is going to set the scene for the whole of the West with this kind of anti-DEI, anti-woke, getting this nonsense, basically putting society back to where it should be. And there's going to be that's going to be very difficult for Keir Starmer because the question will always be put to Keir Starmer. Well, Donald Trump did it. Donald Trump managed to get rid of DEI. Donald Trump managed to do this, and nobody's died. Everyone's okay. And he's going to be setting the standard, which is something that we need. But I do think, sadly, Keir Starmer and this ludicrous Labour government are belligerent enough to just do their own thing. So it's going to be really interesting to see how it pans out. But I do think Manderson probably is the best of a bad bunch, and he's still not a very good pick. I would have picked Farage. I mean, what a power move that would have been by Keir Starmer. I would have found it very difficult not to compliment Keir Starmer if he'd have picked Nigel Farage. I would have said, you know what? I don't like the guy, but that is a very sensible decision. He's put country before party, and he's picked someone that he knows Donald Trump is extremely friendly with. That would have been a brilliant move from Keir Starmer. But of course, that was never going to happen because he's belligerent.
And if it doesn't work out, then Reform are the fastest growing party in the UK at the moment. If it doesn't work out, then he's got ammo against the Reform Party saying, well, look, this is the person who said we could have such strong ties with America, and he hasn't been able to deliver it. Jonathan, I know you want to get onto this topic, and we do only have a short period of time. Elon Musk has had a big influence on the UK government. A lot of British people, I'm going to call out some stats which you both may not like, but a YouGov polls that shows most people in the UK and Germany, because he has been involved with the AfD, disapprove of his efforts to influence national policies. Majority respondents in both countries believe Musk does not understand their politics, and issues, with around 63% of both nations. So it's only a sample that they take, stating he does not know much or nothing at all about the country. I think that's
75% of the public have literally just voted to say that they agree with Elon Musk, and that the Labour government should hold a full national inquiry. So I take that polling with a pinch of salt.
Well, YouGov polls has historically been fairly dubious because it's like self-selected samples. So in the background of who owns it, I don't give that much credit to it, but I can understand some people that don't know who Elon Musk is. We might have a slight bias because we are politically aware and we are permanently online. So we might see things quite differently to like the average person who just come home from work, watches the BBC and, don't really know anything outside
the story rather than finds it out for themselves.
Yeah. Yep. Like just read the news headline and go, oh, what's Elon Musk doing? Putting his nose into our politics. But I'm very thankful for him to highlighting a lot of issues that's happening in Europe, not just in the UK, but also in Germany and other countries as well. So I'm quite thankful for that, because one other thing that I want to point out is Elon Musk has 212 now million followers, right? That's more than 3 times the population of a whole country. We are 68 million, and that is a level of influence he has, is that he has more followers, 3 times the amount of our entire nation. So, and obviously a lot of those numbers are people kids who are not old enough to know politics, or old people who are not into politics. So it's even smaller, the amount of people that's actually politically engaged. But anyway, yeah, I'm very thankful for him for highlighting a lot of issues.
Yvette Cooper has announced that the government obviously has backed local inquiries now, and says that it wasn't because of pressure that she received online from Elon Musk's tweets. If they're still called tweets, let's call them posts. Musk's obviously posts were particularly harsh towards Starmer and the Labour Party. As we said, he's not a big fan of them. But it did lead to the re-examination of these gangs. So, he can take some credit. Obviously, we have got other people who have done this before, and whose work he's been able to rely upon. So it isn't just Musk's work. But, you said 212 million, that's got to have some sort of weight behind it. Lee, do you think Musk has got a future in politics across the world, or do you think this is a temporary thing where he's then going to step back and go back to, I don't know, maybe go to Mars and maybe become the president of Mars?
No, I think this is it for Elon Musk. I think he's. I fully support his interventions. I think it's his right. It's his freedom of speech. This is something that he is very passionate about. Which is why he dislikes Starmer so much. One of the reasons he started getting very into UK politics is when Keir Starmer started putting people in prison for saying things on social media. So I think it's a very positive influence, and it's his right to do it. A lot of this talk about Elon Musk has been convenient for Labour in some respects, because they are more happy. I mean, I've seen more clips of left-wing politicians over the last 24 hours shutting down any politician, who wants to talk about Pakistani rape gangs. We saw it happen in the Welsh Parliament. We've seen Sadiq Khan do it at the London Assembly. We've seen it happen multiple times now. And what's a very easy reach for the Labour Party is to criticise Elon Musk as a distraction technique. We saw Liam Halligan mention this very effectively on Question Time the other night, and he's absolutely right. They're more happy and more outraged to complain about Elon Musk than they actually are about Pakistani rape gangs, and that makes me sick. They are using this as an excuse to attack Elon Musk. What they should be doing, if they had any sense, would be not praising him as such, but acknowledging what he's saying. And in some respects, I think that would make them look like not a better person, but it would certainly make them look like grown-ups if they just said, look, actually, what Elon Musk is saying, we feel the same.
It's right.
He's raising things that we feel, this is what I would do if I was a Labour politician. And I would say that we are going to take this more seriously and stop blaming each other. Like you say, the Tories and the Labour Party are both as bad as each other on this matter. Kimi Badenoch hasn't got a leg to stand on when it comes to this. She doesn't even mention the word grooming gang or rape gang in Parliament until everyone else started talking about it. They had 14 years to do something about it, and they did nothing. They didn't implement they implemented a couple of things from the J report. Or the J inquiry, whatever it was called. But they've sat on it. They've not done anything. And Labour, of course, are up to their necks in it, in my view. Excuse me. So I think Elon Musk's influence has been noticeable. Of course, Yvette Cooper won't admit it. But the reason she stood up in Parliament is partly because of Elon Musk. And I thank him for it.
Yeah. No,
I'm going to leave you both with one question. We are out of time, unfortunately. I'll start with you, Jonathan.
No problem.
Musk can't become the president as he was not born a US national. If he becomes a British citizen, he has every right to become our prime minister. Could you see Prime Minister Musk in the next 2 decades?
Well, look, I'll be happy if that happens, but I don't think it's going to happen. But if he does, I will vote for him.
Lee, same question to you.
I share that sentiment. That won't ever happen, but I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Do you know what I would like to see, though? Something that is more realistic is if they made Elon Musk trade envoy to the UK, and then he could do the thing I mentioned earlier about putting political pressure on the UK to stop putting people in prison for Facebook posts, and then we'll do you a good trade deal. I mean, that would be the ultimate power move by Trump. That would much like to see. But yes, I agree with Jonathan. If Musk did want to run, I'd blooming well vote for him, because he'd run for reform probably.
I mean, I was going to go Labour, but
of course he would run for reform. He's a reform fan. He's a big fan of reform.
Just not for, or maybe not for.
Just not for Raj. Maybe Rupert Lowe.
They've kissed and made up now. I think they've kissed and made up now. But they seem to have done that. Yeah, but even so.
A last point on there, Lee. He probably can't become the trade minister because T is in the word Doge, so he can't do that. So, but thank you both for coming on the program today. It's been an absolute honour, Jonathan. Thank you for making your debut on the program. Hope to have you back, and Lee, it's been fantastic to have you back on the program too.
Pleasure.
And that's all we've got time for on In Focus this week with me, Curtis Hinton. As I say, I was joined by Jonathan Wong and Lee Harris, both political commentators, and Lee is also a broadcaster. We've talked about Starmer out of the country again and whether or not he will weigh up going back to the EU. We've talked about Elon Musk and his involvement in the UK and, in fact, eastern of the US politics. And, of course, we talked about Trump's return back to the White House. You've been watching In Focus with me, Curtis Hinton, on Q's News. Stay tuned, stay informed, stay focused. Good night.